One of the reasons why I'm both a botanist and an ecologist is the fact that I was born and bred at Ethekwini in the old days. And there we had everything. As I put in that CV that I passed to you just now, and I try to use a bit of alliteration. We had the birds, the bucks, the butterflies, and so on, and the bugs, of course. We had good fishing, we had good boating. It was fun for us as children to take a sheet of corrugated iron, flatten it out, bend it up, put a bit of wood in the back, and that became a canoe. And we canoed, we rowed, we had fun. Prep school was at Ethekwini. We had two schools at Pingo, what we called the government school, and the other one called Ethekwini Beach Preparatory School. And I went to the latter. And from there I went to Michael House. Matriculated, went to NUC, as it was then known. And I couldn't stand Johnny Smuts with his finger pointing at us and saying, "We want you." So several of us joined up. We were lucky enough to write our first year exams before we joined up, but we were given about a week's notice and said we'd be writing on the full year's syllabus. That was a candle being burnt at both ends, just what the syllabus is of 4 subjects. Because in those days it was the big 4, so to speak: physics, chem, bot, zoo. And luckily enough, I passed.
Sure.
Got the results when I was in Italy. It was really kind of the registrar to send them and say, "Congratulations, you have passed." Well, a year later, or a little more than a year later, referring to your question, I was demobbed. Went back to university second year and plowed my way through eventually to an MSc, but that was much later. PSc honours was what I left. Now, I think when I eventually realised what had happened, I was indeed not proud, but I was humbled. As I sit here, I don't really believe that I'm a legend. But if one took the word and broke it up into leg end, then I am probably a foot. Yeah, that's difficult, because my field is different from anything in a way. But I suppose also in a way my father influenced me, not so much in words but by action. He died when I was before I matriculated, in fact at the beginning of my matric year. But he had instilled into me principles. And I still believe in truth. As regards the ecological side of my life, it is hardly known as a word or as a subject when I first started at university. It was just a branch of botany, and in some cases a branch of zoology. And luckily, taking both zoo and botany and being interested in organisms that belong to what some people would call plants, what other people would call animals, I'm interested in their reaction. I'm really interested in what they do to the environment and what the environment does for them. I'm almost teased and known for my notebooks. I always carry a notebook. And if you want to know, this particular one is number 588. So if the good Lord leaves me long enough, I'll get them transcribed. Various observations. I better not describe how the last hour and the next half hour is going to be put in my notebook. So, phenology is one of the subjects that interests me. And take something like the common wild banana. A friend of mine, whom you will be interviewing, Professor Baisnard, is writing a book on strelitzios. And just a small observation will be given to him as well. And Right, I've been writing down what's happening to a particular flower that I've got around the corner over there. For the last few days it's been opening, but the stigma, I don't know if you're a botanist at all, but the stigma is the female receptive part of a bisexual flower. And the stigma in Strelitzia nicolai, which is the Natal wild banana, is a long thing that sticks out, well, very much like that Strelitzia that you've got up there. The last thing to be withdrawn from the spathe, that is the inflorescent bract, is the stigma. But rather cleverly, it holds it down, and the median petal is actually two conniving petals in the Strelitzia, and the anthers lie in that groove. But by being held down by the stigma, these are opened up. It's possible that something as simple as holding the stigma, forcing it to open the groove in the median petal, well, there are actually two petals, opens up the anthers. So here you have masses of pollen available for any visitor, whether it be a bird that comes and puts its foot in it, or a bee. And a lot of people think bees and bananas, they don't really go together, but they do. They are visited by bees, same way as those flowers down there are visited by bees. And one of the things that interests me is the bee collecting pollen, or is the bee collecting nectar? And is it really doing a cross-pollination? Or is it just chance that it's standing there doing its thing? And I think that, well, there's a certain amount of accidental pollination, let's put it that way. But there is also, obviously, success. And that Strelitzia produces a lot of seeds. Very pretty seeds. And then another animal comes in onto it. The birds and the monkeys like the seeds. They don't necessarily eat the seed, but an animal that many people overlook, and is very important for many of our, well, at least our coastal plants, and that is fruit bats. Fruit bats come in and they take seeds. They'll take the seeds of, well, that plant that's flowering above you shouldn't be here. It's a prohibited plant. It's I look after it and make certain that its seeds don't get lost. In fact, I make jam out. It's the Brazilian cherry, or Suriname cherry to give its more correct name. But the bats eat it. But I have a little anecdote, if you'd like me to tell it, about bats. We grow bananas here, and I hang the bananas on the back veranda as they're ripening, so they will ripen and we'll get them rather than the monkeys. We have fruit bats, and they like bananas. There was one particular one that got quite used to me, and I used to take bananas and hang it in the tree, and it used to come and eat them. And then one night I'd forgotten to do this, and I was on the telephone, which, as you probably know, is next to our front door. And to my surprise and amusement, the bat flew very slowly down the veranda here and looked in, as though to say, "Hey, what are you doing?" It turned around and flew back and looked over its left shoulder with the same expression, if one can interpret an animal's expression. And this fellow, I went out and fed it. And a couple of months later, somebody shot it. And that animal had enough energy to fly here and land on my back step. And I went out and I saw this poor animal lying there with blood coming out of its chest. And as I picked it up, it died. Why did it come back to me? Did it think I could help it? It's one of the saddest things that happened in wildlife where I'm concerned. However, there we are. Well, my wife and I have been married for over 57 years. We produced 3 offspring, and the youngest, 21 years ago, and his wife and baby were killed. So we now have one son who is currently overseas and a daughter who's in Durban. The youngest was certainly making a name for himself in the botanical ecological field, and the other has a doctorate in geology, but with a botanical bend in it. And in fact, he'll be going with me, I hope, if he gets back from overseas. He's overseas right at the moment, and he would like to attend the ceremony, and we'll drive together to the two conferences, hoping that we'll get there in time for the last day of the first conference and certainly in time for the second conference. But he worked and he got his doctorate in that area. So they were rather keen. I had a letter last evening from a professor in Cape Town asking how to contact John, is his name, and whether he would be prepared to give a talk. Well, John's as bad as I am, we're prepared to talk at any time. And he would be the right sort of person for that in that area. Yes, I think so. I think my early life, looking at the birds and bees and butterflies and bats and bushbuck, I think that's really, one can't help. All right, I had many friends who didn't go into that field. They were otherwise employed. But I think anybody who had just the slightest bend towards this would have followed up the same sort of steps as I did. And perhaps there's another little thing there. Being rather young, as you will appreciate, my age when I joined up, I was slightly under 18, but I turned 18 on my embarkation leave. So I was fairly young even when I returned to university. And although the science fellows had pracs every afternoon, at the end of the pracs, those of us who were sportsmen, and I played all the sports, let's put it that way, but they still gave me time to get out into the field. I boarded with people out at Allerton Laboratories, and I think that helped to push me into the ecological field as well. Walking by myself in what was then a grassy valley, which is now covered with alien trees, eucalyptus and bottles and so on. In fact, I was tempted when I returned to Oroby Airport on Saturday to take a photograph, and I said to the pilot, that's where I used to, as a schoolboy, surf on a surfboard down a grassy slope, and now it's a plantation. That's how life goes. That's how we've lost our indigenous vegetation. That's a very difficult question to answer. There are too many things, and I don't believe that just one thing pushed me into what I'm doing. I don't want to sound too much of a goodie, but I do believe in truth, and I do believe in looking carefully at things, even if they're heretical. I use that term in its true sense. If we talk about something that we know to be correct, that's fine. But if we talk because we've been taught to talk that way, and it's not correct, then it's wrong. If that sounded like gibberish, it is a bit of gibberish, but I didn't mean it to be like that. What I meant was that in teaching, for example, I used to say to my students, I teach what I believe. If you don't believe me, then let us discuss the matter. Don't go away saying, it's not right. We are learning all the time. And let's be honest, if I learned from my teachers and have forgotten some of what they've taught me, and I merely regurgitate what I've remembered, you're going to do the same. We only need a couple of generations and people don't know nothing, because we're losing all the time. But to debate, to observe, but to do it correctly is the way to advance, not the other way. That's a very difficult one. I enjoy what I'm doing. In fact, it was a height of embarrassment to have been given a medal recently, as though I had done something. And all I did was to follow what I wanted to do. It's like you people interviewing me now. As though, oh, it's an embarrassment, I'll be honest. But it's a very humiliating experience to me. I just get on and do what I need to do. My biggest problem is trying to find the 26th hour in the day. So far, I've only had 24. Those two questions, while they appear to be linked, are actually very separate. The problem of today is the carrying capacity of the world for the most abundant animal, which is human beings. It's not the most abundant animal if you look at some of the smaller organisms, but it's one of the most influential animal on the earth is human being. And it's very difficult to suggest to anybody that there needs to be a control of those that are being born. It's emotional, it's spiritual, and it's certainly political. No politician is going to get up willingly and say, hey, we're limiting the number of children you can have. China tried it, and it seemed to have worked. But there's still a mighty lot of Chinese people over in China. But if you look at the continent of Africa, what are you seeing? If you want to put it perhaps very simplistically, you're seeing large mammals giving way to smaller mammals because there's no habitat. You're finding trees being chopped down and replaced by shrubs. You're finding shrubs being replaced by smaller plants because the shrubs can be burnt. They provide the very necessary fuel for cooking and for lighting and for warmth. But if there are too many shrubs being taken out, they're going to be replaced by what? Grasses? But if there's overgrazing, as we have so much in this country, there's not going to be much in the way of grass. What you will have is the wind will continue to blow. The first thing it does is remove little bits of organic material because that's lighter than the soil. So you're depauperate the soil. The next thing you do, you've possibly taken away the material that binds the soil. So now we'll have sand dunes. We'll have sand movement. We can see what's happened in Namibia. We can see what's happening in parts of Botswana, what's happening in Northern Cape. And if you don't want to go that far, you can have a look at the beach on a windy day and see what the sand does. Buries, destroys, excavates. And what about the carrying capacity? It's reducing the carrying capacity, reducing the food for those who want to live in certain areas. I can't go on with this because, in a nutshell, a considerable amount has been said about global warming, and I believe that the important letter has been left out. It is global swarming that we need to be aware of. And wiser people than myself need to be able to try to reduce this, because believe you me, the effect of more people is going to be quicker in reducing our natural resources than global warming. But global warming goes with it because it changes our climate. That's a peculiar question. I didn't think I'd ever be asked anything like that. From mine to them, or them to me, I cannot answer what they think of me. But I appreciate the friendship that I've had. I enjoy the cooperation I've had from everybody. There's nobody that I have I don't have enemies in that. As I said, that's my side. Whether other people say, hey, Ward talks through the back of his damn head, we don't want to know his troubles. That's another story. I can't answer for them, but I can answer for my side. Yes, I've had some very good friends. Yes, it's very nice to know that there have been students who've appreciated the work that I did, that I tried to get across. There's a presentation I was given at what they thought was my 80th birthday, which was a year later. That's why I'm a year younger than people think. I'll show you it. And it summarizes what at least two people thought of me and the education they received through me. I'm very proud of it. I really am. And I'm humbled. Again, being awarded, well, 2 medals, one for my MSc way back in 1972, and then the Medley Wood Medal, and then being made an honorary member of the Game Rangers Association. Goodness me, these guys could have kicked my butt because oh, sorry. We worked together very well. They did the hard work. I merely told them what I thought they should do. I'll show you their manifesto if you wish. But the Game Rangers Association comprises a number of people who were game rangers, and they aim to really look after the natural resources of a country. Their expertise is available for doing that sort of thing. And as I said, I wasn't a ranger in the true sense. I mean, in my days, there was only one ecologist, for example, and I was it. And today, of course, there are several in different reserves. But in those days, too, we worked together. People said, what are your hours? Well, in summertime, they were a little longer in the field than in the wintertime, because I worked from sun up to sundown. And one person who'd been allocated to me by one of the rangers said, I think you better stick around with Roddy Ward for a couple of days. He sarcastically said something about, well, it's night time now, we can't see anything, we better go home. And I said, well, I've got a bright torch. And that's been my attitude towards life. We've got on with things, we've done things, we haven't just talked. So I tended to wear out the soles of my shoes quicker than the seats of my pants, which I wouldn't necessarily say is always the case. I think that'll be up to other people to accept what I've done. I can't enlarge further than that, otherwise it sounds like I'm blowing my own trumpet, and I don't want to do that. I don't think I have a trumpet to blow in the first place. Some people think I do, but I don't. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm here. I'm always available for verbal help. If I can, I enjoy physical work, but I don't have the time. And I think some people look at me and say, hell, that skinny old bee can't possibly do anything of physical advantage to other people, but I can. That's very difficult. Everything from, well, I was just, funny enough, looking at things this morning. There's something I've never talked about. The very first award I ever got was a silver cup for winning the mile open race at the age of 10 in an open race. The other fellows are up to 13 and 14, and I beat them. Then, of course, from an awards point of view, the next real award I got was the Junior Captain Medal for my MSc. And the thing that went hand in hand with it was the fact that my MSc was accepted with the minimal changes. Somebody said with no change. And it's been published as a Botanical Survey, Memoir number 45, which is the plant ecology of the Ethekwini Beach area. It's there on the table if you'd like to have a look at it. There were a few pioneering things in it. For example, I gave an annotated checklist that I'd never seen done before, and I don't know whether it's been done much since then. And that is that most annotated checklists is just to say a plant giving its name occurs in an area. Well, mine went a little further than that, and if you'd like to have a look at them, you're welcome to do so. They mention the visitors to flowers, visitors to the fruit, what do they do, where do they occur. And as I said, I felt very proud of, as a recipient of what those two students put together. And I felt then that my attitude towards life and teaching had been vindicated.